Intellect. Welcome to the Battle of the Sexes show expert chat. Today we are going to talk all about libidos, and we're joined by a special guest. My name is Goddess Intellect. Of course, I'm the creator of Battle of the Sexes show. I'm a relationship coach and also the blogger at goddessintellect.com, and I'm joined by Dr. Brandy Engler, who's here with us today. She's a sex therapist and the author of The Men on My Couch. I have it. I don't know if everybody can see it. But it's like my go-to book for like a reference for men and sexuality, and I'm so honored to have her here today to talk about libido. I can't tell you how many questions throughout the year I'll get, Brandy, on libido. Like people, and it ranges. I'll get questions on, women who have lost the desire to have sex and they feel pressured by their husbands or their boyfriends to have more sex, and they're like, it's gone. I don't want to do it anymore. And then I'll get emails from men who are like, I wish, my girlfriend would do this and that, and then I get emails from girlfriends who are like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like, I want to have sex and everything, but that's not the kind of sex I want to have. So I'll get a range of questions, and I thought that this would be just the perfect opportunity to sit down and talk about it, because I know that you discuss libido, you touch on it quickly, and you do talk a lot about the differences in sexuality and how we perceive it for men and women in your book, The Men on My Couch. So I thought this is a perfect opportunity to discuss it, and it's perfect because Battle of the Sexes show, we're constantly having discussions between men and women. So first of all, for people who are just joining us and may not be familiar with the word libido, I thought I'd give a little short description. So libido is basically another word for sex drive. It's your desire for sexual activity, and this can range, and it's also determined by biology, by psychological factors and social factors. And today we're going to delve into what all that means, what to do if there's differences, and just talking about how you can go about enhancing libido. There's so many things out there. There's pills, all kinds of unnatural enhancements, and then there's also a lot of so-called natural enhancements too. So I want to get into all of that today. But first I wanted to have Brandy introduce herself and, tell us what you've been up to, because the last time we talked about your book, and it was probably like a year ago when I first discovered it, and we were talking about some of the concepts in the book. And I remember when we last left off, you said you were working on a book on libido, so I just wanted to kind of catch up and see how you've been doing since our last chat.
Yeah, so The Men on My Couch has been out now for almost 2 years, and it's recently been optioned by CBS to be turned into a TV show, so I'm very excited about that. The second book, which I just finished, it was originally going to be called Libido, but my agent had me change the name to The Women on My Couch, so it's just going to be the second in a series. And libido will just be one among many other themes that I'm going to explore around sexuality. Oh. But I think this is a really good topic today to talk about libido, because libido, low libido specifically, and for women, is the #1 issue that's presented in sex therapy clinics. And interestingly, for the range of sexual dysfunctions that people can have, sex therapy is largely effective for it. All kinds of treatments, they're very effective. But for low libido, there is no proven effective treatment for it. And so there's a real debate in the community around whether it's even natural or not, whether women are less sexual than men, whether it's normal to lose your libido. And it's a complicated issue that doesn't have one pat answer.
Definitely, and there's so many factors that influence it too. I wanted to ask you, what are the 3 misconceptions about libido? Because I'm sure you're posed with a lot of questions, and people ask you stuff, or you see things written that are not necessarily true. So let's
Sure. I think one big one is that this is an issue that's specific to women. The truth is there are tons of men out there who also struggle with low libido, so it's not really a gender-specific issue. So that's one. And another is that even though it's very common for women to lose their libido in a long-term relationship, it doesn't always mean that they've lost their libido altogether. It usually just means that they've lost it specific to their partner, meaning that they might still be attracted to other people, which raises questions about women's ability to be monogamous. And that in itself challenges the idea that, you know, women are naturally more monogamy seeking than men. You know, so that's also very interesting.
Wow, that's
Yeah, and even more, to add one more point to that it's also assumed that women's sexuality is very emotional, and that if you just have this like close, intimate, emotionally sort of connected relationship, that women's libido will be higher. But the research doesn't confirm that, and in fact, when couples' libido is studied and they try and apply couples therapy as a technique to help them improve their communication and intimacy, it often backfires, making libido worse.
Wow.
So it's not. So being close emotionally is not necessarily tied to women's sex drive.
You know what? I want to bring up the story of in the book, because I was just skimming over, of Tasha and Alex. I believe they had somewhat of a close emotional relationship, but she was seeing someone else and she was desiring someone else, and anything he tried, although he read all the books in the world and thought he knew all the techniques, it still wasn't enough, just the technique alone, to kind of push her over the edge. And we also discovered in the book, too, that it was also her discovery that was blocking them making that connection.
Right, so she's a great example of a woman who had an egalitarian relationship. She was overall happy in the relationship, but yet she was, you know, not sexually turned on by him. And she would sort of force herself to go through the motions, having duty sex, as I call it. And having that duty sex did not increase her libido for him. There are some sexperts out there who want to tell you that the more you do it, the more you're going to enjoy it, to sort of get into it, it'll build a momentum. But that's not the case for a lot of people. You really have to look at, like, what is the dynamic between the two of them that's turning them off. And what ended up happening with Kasha in that story, that she met sort of a sexy stranger who seduced her, and then she had her libido ignited for that guy.
Yeah, she liked the surprise factor, or just, you know, that aggressiveness that he didn't have. He was so, like, kind of submissive, like, oh my God, what can I do to please you? Where he didn't kind of take control of the situation, which he craved. So I thought
that's a really good point that you bring up, because it's not just that the guy was mysterious, or, you know, the sex was forbidden and dangerous, or that it was novelty. All of those, of course, help out attraction. But, you know, what determines what makes libido sustainable or not is actually something that's in the relationship dynamic, where in the story of Alex, he was like, even though he followed all the steps in the self-help books, he was still overly pleasing with her, to the point where he was kind of a doormat, a little too ingratiating. And that sort of Mr. Nice Guy thing obviously turns women off. And so the more a guy can be more, you know, sort of able to stand up to her, able to, like, hold on to himself, like, be confident, that kind of thing, the more she's going to be seduced, that was basically the lesson of that story.
Some people would take what you just said and say, okay, now I've got to become like this really rough, aggressive person who's not, and that's not their nature. So what would you say to, like, nice guys who are, you know, that want to please their women, but they know they're not getting through to them sexually?
That's a really great question that a lot of guys ask me that. It's not that a nice guy, actually, I shouldn't even use that word, because it's okay to be a nice guy. In fact, women do want men to be nice. So a lot of women assume it's bad to be or men will assume it's bad to be a nice guy, and they go all the way to the other side of the you know, spectrum, and become aggressive and kind of a jerk, thinking this is what women want. You got to treat them bad. You got to be a jerk. It's not that. What women are really looking for, I think, is just somebody who maintains his sense of confidence in a relationship. So that can be that he's decisive, that he knows how to take charge, that he knows what he wants, he knows how to be a leader. Not that we want to be led around necessarily, but we need all of those same qualities for ourselves. And men are looking for those same qualities for ourselves. And those qualities often break down in a relationship.
Are you talking about the taking charge or standing up to, your mate? Is that what you mean where that breaks down?
Right. So if you think about it, if you're in a relationship, you're gonna be constantly managing differences between the two of you. And if you live together, tons of differences just in how you live your daily life. One person might wake up early in the morning, the other one likes to stay up all night. One person likes to leave dishes in the sink, the other doesn't. The other one wants a clean house. Like there's a million things to sort of have a differences over. So how you manage those differences is really important. And so obviously it's good to like negotiate, things like that. But when you sort of stand up for yourself and you take a strong position with your partner in the house and you're very confident about your opinions, about your positions on things, not that you're inflexible, but you're just demonstrating confidence, that's actually all those little micro moments where you're doing that is really key to attraction.
It's true. I speak about this too, about remaining your own person. But sometimes that's hard to translate to sexuality. And another thing I wanted to bring up with Kasha, she had to explore her own eroticism. And I try to communicate that to people who, like, especially women who come to me and say, there's, he wants me to have more animalistic sex, and that's not my thing, or he wants me to try this, like maybe anal sex or something that's totally something they're not comfortable with. And oftentimes I find that if they are very intimidated by that, they're also having to also express what is sexy to them or what turns them on. So for women, how would you suggest going about exploring, their
So I think that I lost the audio there for a minute. I don't hear you. Let's see. Can you hear me? You can't hear me, yes? Okay, I can't hear you, but I'll speak anyways. So I think that it's important for women to have a process where they're being conscious about their sexual decisions. And so I think that you should be suspicious of any like very reactive yes or no. Yes meaning I'll just for the sake of this, this person, I will do anything for them without thinking about whether or not this is healthy for you or not, or just rigidly saying no right away. So I think that if your no is I don't want to do that because I might be feeling shy or not sure about my own eroticism, maybe a little embarrassed and inhibited, but I kind of want to. There might be room there for you to sort of push the edges of your anxiety a little bit, but you also have to think, what is it that he's asking you to do? Is it something that's going to harm me physically, or is it something that it's going to harm my emotional health in some way if I'm participating in that? And I think it's fine if the answer is, I think that what he's asking is playing out some kind of scenario that's going to make me feel humiliated or degraded or harmed in some way. I think it's fine to pass on that. And the truth is that some men, like women, have to be thoughtful about this because some men in their sexual requests are coming from a place where they're being harmful, whether they're conscious of it or not. And sometimes, you can just feel it through your intuition that he's acting something out that's very hostile or angry or abusive under the guise of this is just my preference, right? There's a lot of people out there who are so quick to sort of affirm any kind of preferences so that we support diversity in sexual preferences, that we stop sort of being thoughtful and reflective about what's going on with the content of those preferences, because often with our sexual fantasies there's a lot of psychological material there that is related to that guy's or that person's individual like wounds and traumas in the past. I still don't have audio. Mm. I don't hear you.
Hello? Uh-oh. Hello? Dr. Vibe? Okay.
Hello?
Hi.
All right.
Did I end up kicking everyone off?
You did not kick me off. I saw that you were gone, so I left for a minute and came back.
Okay. I'm not sure if we're streaming still. It seems like it. Because I see Dr. Vibe there. Let me just check for myself to see if we're streaming. And we were getting to the best part too. I believe we're live. I end up kicking everyone off. Yes, we are still live. That's great. Now to get to where we left off at. Do you remember?
Yeah, did you have a question for me? I know you were trying to ask me a question. I sort of went on a long explanation about conscious sexuality and how to sort of figure out those questions when a guy proposes some kind of kink or sexual thing that she's ambivalent about.
Oh, yes. Okay. And the second part to my question was, how can a woman explore her natural eroticism? How can she begin to explore what she finds sexy? Because a lot of us don't know. I know for myself, I grew up in a Christian home, and like even sitting without your legs crossed was, you were judged or looked at like, what are you doing? Are you, you're fast or whatever. So for me, my personal journey, it took me a while to open up. It really took me a while to open up. So I know that I'm not the only one kind of struggling with that. I mean, I'm not struggling anymore. I'm pretty open. But for a woman who's like, I don't know where to start. I don't know what I find sexy. I just kind of see whatever in the adult films or whatever's out there, and I think that's sexy, but that's not quite me.
That is such a good question because I think that there is no clear path for how a woman can explore that, right? We have this sort of cliche, like, sort of like answers, like, um, try a threesome, or, kiss a girl at a bar, or, something like that, or, sort of mimic what you see in porn, or, other things like that. And that's like supposedly the sexual exploration, not to sort of minimize that, but it's often sort of just a cliche, like, looking to pop culture to understand how you're supposed to explore your sexuality. And there is no easy answer for that. And in fact, my entire second book, like, I talk about my own exploration, like how am I going to answer that question for myself and for my clients who are asking me that question, because psychology doesn't necessarily have an answer for that, for how to explore, how to find your own eroticism. And I think that at the core, like, our eroticism is connected to our ability to understand ourselves, to be connected to ourselves and what we want, and then our ability to express what it is that we want. So a large part of libido problems is the inhibition of expression, like our creative impulses, our fantasies that arise, feelings that we have toward the guy. All of these things can be expressed sexually, and that's really the foundation of passion, which is what everybody really wants, is passion. Passion is different than chemistry, which is very biological. That's nice too, but everyone really wants passion. And you can't have passion if you're not expressing things, if you're not in touch with yourself and sharing and expressing something. So that is fundamentally, what am I in the mood for right now? What do I want right now? And how do I sexualize that is the process, right? And so a lot of women think, well, in order to be sexual, I have to look pretty and I have to be in a good mood and I have to not be tired, and like to wait for all of those like elements to like be aligned is like waiting for a rare moon eclipse or something. Like, it's not going to happen, right? And so you have to really answer the question of like, what's my state right now? Do I have PMS? Am I kind of tired? Am I bored? And then how do you sexualize that? Or how do you create a story out of that? Or creating what you need. So if you're really tired because you had a long day, and then what you need probably is to be relaxed, right? So perhaps you take a bath. Perhaps you create some nice, like, relaxing setting. You eroticize that. So instead of trying to be something you're not, like a French maid or something like that, it's you be what you are and you sexualize that. That's a very important skill. If you've got that skill down, then you can add on top. It's like level 2 is like being the French maid, is like fantasy, like you're sort of playing with different things. But that's better for people who you already know who you are and you're very solid in your sense of self. Because once you're going into the role play stuff and fantasy stuff, what you're doing is you're dissociating from yourself. And that's fine, but if you don't have a solid sense of self and you're constantly trying out roles where you're not yourself, you're hiding yourself, the end result can feel like an emptiness, or something will feel wrong and off about it, is what I noticed. And so sometimes these things are a little bit better for married couples or just people who have a strong sense of self.
Okay, that's a really good point. So you would suggest starting with yourself and just regular scenarios or things you love doing, and then building on that, and not really going all the way to the top, experimenting with something so extreme.
Right, like trying some like extreme kink or something that's like where you're really like dissociating from who you are. But I think that in my book, part of my exploration was like I explored all over the place. I went to reading erotica stories that are written by women for women. I read erotic poetry from all over the world. I explored various cultures and historical periods where they really flourished in sexuality, like the Kama Sutra, Tantra, Taoism in ancient China was this beautiful period of earthy sensuality where women's sexuality was at the fore of importance. Men actually went to school to become love masters, learning how to please women. So we don't hear about this, but all over the world there were periods of time where it was thought that orgasms led to pregnancy. And so women sort of having orgasms was very important. And so during all of that, there's just sexuality, in some of these times was just simple and natural and celebrated. And I can only imagine what women's desire was like in that kind of environment, right? Where you're not facing religious oppression, where you're not facing oppression from men in any way, where sex is just generally celebrated. And so, I can only imagine what that was like. But I tried to imagine that for myself or create that for myself by exploring that poetry, by exploring art from that period of time and surrounding myself with that. And I felt what it did is it shifted my own gaze of how I saw my body and how I saw a man's body and what sex could be.
That's amazing. That's amazing, the journey. I can't wait till your book comes out. And I feel I've studied in college, I did a course on the goddess. So we kind of explored that time period where women were worshipped. But it wasn't, men were submissive or they weren't anything. It was like there was equal value to both of them. And men knew the value of women and they celebrated the feminine and that sort of thing. So when you bring that up, I was like, yes. I remember reading about that, and that kind of led me to kind of do my own goddess exploration and to have this blog because I loved that time period. I loved reading about that time period because I was like, yes, this is, and I feel like we're kind of slowly but surely, we're getting back there. I know Tantra is really popular. That's something I definitely want to explore. But it's like, I know there's a softer side of sexuality. How would you convince your partner who may be a little rough around the edges to kind of explore that with you? Because the masculine sexuality is a lot more aggressive, animalistic, and sometimes we have that in us too, women. Like we just want, we want it hard and fast and that's it. We have that in us as well. But I think for men, it's a little harder to bring them on a feminine sexual journey.
Well, men are often socialized toward this very narrow view of what sex should be for a man. And I found in talking to men that they're often anxious and excited to get out of that it's constricting for them, right? And even though it might be rewarding, but when they get pulled into the sensual, sort of relaxing side of a more feminine sexuality that allows desire to build slowly instead of really fast, that they enjoy it. It often works for them. And so I think that women can be leaders in that way. And this is something that's very important to me, is that women take responsibility for libido, and that they're not just passive sort of reactionary in this passive reactionary place, like waiting for men to do everything, and then women are going to decide if they're seduced, if they like what he's doing or not, right? Instead, women owning their own sexuality and bringing it to the guy. I want to do this. This is what I like. Or come with me. I'm going to show you something, right? And I think that when you have both men and women doing that, offering something in the bedroom, there's going to be more friction. Therefore, there's more electricity.
That's an awesome point. That's great. I want to kind of switch it to sexual compatibility, because I get a lot of letters about that. And I'm sure there's people watching who are like, we should ask it already. What do you do if things are out of balance? Like, you may have started off in the passion, with flying, and you were having sex all the time, and maybe after kids, or maybe things have changed, like somebody's got laid off, or job situations, or money problems, or something has come into the mix, or just that routine, or just one partner giving more than the other. What would you suggest to bring it back together? Or is it fixable? Like, is it fixable, or is that just that person is fading away from you and that's it?
And so when you say compatibility, do you mean in sexual styles, or do you mean in sexual desire? One person has more than the other?
I think for the purpose of this, for this conversation, we'll say desire.
Desire, okay.
That's where a lot of not all of the questions, but a lot of the questions have to do with desire.
So first, I just want to normalize that having a difference in desire happens to most people. And so not to feel threatened if you have low desire and he has high desire, or it's the other way around. Often over the course of a long relationship, desire will be up and down for both people. Sometimes they'll switch roles, and that it's okay to have that difference. But what's important is how you manage that difference, just like you would manage any kind of difference in a relationship, like differences in any major decision, like should we have kids, what restaurants do we go to, like anything, how you manage differences.
Right.
What I don't want women to do is to just think to either totally avoid it and like just not have sex because she doesn't want to. So sorry, you know what I mean? That's not like a problem that you can just avoid. It has to be addressed in some way. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you should just like start having sex whenever he wants to either. And in fact, if you choose that route, then you're going to start associating sex with something you don't want, like it's a chore, right? You're conditioning yourself to see it as a duty, and that's not good either. And so I think the important thing is to ask yourself why, if your desire's been low, like it's a pattern, it's been happening for a while, like what's going on? What is shutting me down, right? And then once you get to that answer, you can do something with it. Usually it could be any number of answers for any woman. You know, sometimes it's a relationship issue, sometimes it's body image, sometimes it's personal, but it's something to get to the bottom of.
Is there anything that, if it is a woman and say it's a body issue or something, is there anything her partner can do to kind of help or support her? Or is it up to the person with the low libido to say, this is how you support me?
Yeah, I think it's up to the low libido person to show him. Often men, this is something I noticed, it's when couples come in with low libido issues, often the guys are so supportive when the woman has a low libido. I'll do anything that she needs. I want her to feel beautiful. What is it that she needs? And I think that's a great attitude because sometimes the guy, his skills like around seducing her are not awesome. But at least he might have a good attitude about wanting to help and being supportive. And just with like, a few conversations, in the therapy room, he can learn how to turn her on better. He'll try. So I appreciate that effort. Whereas often I see in my therapy practice when men come in and they have a low libido, the women are much less patient and much less supportive. They're like, why are you not turned on by me? What's wrong with you? You figure this problem out or else, it's like night and day the difference in attitude.
What can women do to be more patient and supportive, or should they?
I think not personalize it. I think that libidos go up and down. It's a myth that men are supposed to like want sex all the time or to even want sex with their like partner all the time, and to just understand that there's all kinds of internal emotional variables for him, physical variables that might make his libido go lower. And she should just be supportive when it happens. How can I help you? Is there something I can do for you to get you going again?
Right. So there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes.
There are things that she can do. I know you said that most of the time when the women with the low libido come in with their partner, his seduction skills are often off. So would you say the same about women? Because we also talked earlier about women being more, forward with what they want. And do you find that a lot of women are lacking in seduction skills as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of guys, well, this is just what men are complaining to me. I think some of what they say to me is that she expects me to do all the work, or that she just will take her clothes off and be like, look at me, that's it, that's what I'm supposed to do, right? And a lot of men will tell me, well, I need more than that, you know what I mean? And so it's up to each individual guy, what it is that he needs. Is it some kind of dynamic that he needs to feel, he needs to feel loved, or he needs her to do something sexy? It's not usually that they're looking for some elaborate routine, but something sort of flirtatious or seductive to also get him in the mood too.
Right. Okay, I thought that was a very important point. You're complaining about this low sex drive, but what are you doing to kind of help the situation? It needs to, right?
Right. And some of it's just based on misunderstanding about what, men's sexuality, that they just they're so visual that they just see a naked woman and they're turned on immediately. It's not always like that.
Right. Sometimes they need that touch, or a little bit more. So they need us to say, this is what I want it now. They need that, and that was one of the things that I had to discover on my journey too. I was like, oh, okay. I thought I was just supposed to kind of look pretty and,
Yeah.
that's totally like when you get into committed relationships, you'll find that no, that's not all. That's not all they need, all men need. So I'm glad you brought that up. I'm just looking at our time. Oh my gosh, it went by so quick. I'm just gonna double check to see if, because I know that there is one person probably watching that had a question. No, okay. So he's probably just watching. No problem. I have enough questions. I have more than enough questions. I know we were talking about sex drive, so now let's switch to styles, because I know that's also something that comes up too. There might be a difference in, like, I know in the book, I forget what character it was, where she wanted, flowers and fairies and pixies, like that was her sexual style, and then her partner's style was a little bit more aggressive and sloppy and dirty and animalistic. So they had a bit of a clash there. So what would you suggest in a situation like that where your partner may have a different style?
Okay.
All the time.
Okay, so I also want to normalize like those kind of differences happening, and that's not terrible if your partner has different kinds of fantasies or a different approach to sex than you do. What's important is that both of you can sort of open yourselves to trying to experience the other person's like way of having sex. That you could see that as like an act of intimacy, that you're each sharing your personal style, and to just sort of take turns like engaging in each other's style, like accommodating that, like he can make love, and she can try the animal side. In some ways, it's like you're each growing that opposite side of your personality.
Yeah, and acknowledging that too, because it's important. Like, I don't think there's a wrong way to have sex, right? It's just, don't be afraid. I would say don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of trying a different style. And
right.
I love that you talked about the softer, feminine, sensual side of sex, and that men are open to that. That kind of like makes me happy, because that's kind of how I am. And it's such a great side to explore, especially like tantra and that kind of thing. But it's hard to define that and package it and then explain it to a guy, right? They have to kind of like come on the journey with you.
Right, it's experiential learning.
Yes. Something where I can't be like, you have to do this, this, and that. Like, you got to come on the ride with me and actually experience what it is. So, yeah, that's really cool. Did you have any? Are there any other issues that your clients will bring up about libido?
About libido? Yeah, I think that I wanted to say this also, is that sometimes it's men who are wanting like the softer, more sensual sexuality, and it's the women who are coming in who are saying, I want him to spank me and I want him to push me up against the wall and be aggressive, and then the guy will turn around and say, but that's not my personality. I'm not even, I don't, that doesn't even turn me on. And so I think that, that people are just all over the place, like with what they want. And I think that a healthy sexuality is one that's more fluid. It's open. It's like willing to sort of try different things and receive sort of different points of view. Rather than some people's sexual turn-ons become very narrow and rigid and fixed on like one particular thing, and they have this sort of demand that the other person do their one particular thing. And I think that when that's happening, there's often something going on there, in my experience, something psychological, or there's some anxiety that's leading them to be like in this little box. It has to be this and only this, And then the other person's a prisoner to that.
Right. It's a very interesting analogy.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of, in the beginning I had mentioned, there's a lot of enhancers. Like, even when you Google libido, it's like automatically ads pop up. It's like natural enhancement and this medication and that. So what is your perspective on enhancement? Like, would you suggest that to any of your patients at all, or do you kind of, that's just not your area, or you wouldn't suggest
that? That is really not my wheelhouse, and I think that I'm not interested in it because I think that it's something that could be cultivated just more holistically. Like, I feel like the medicinal approach to anything sexual, including like Viagra for erections, is sort of just a band-aid approach to get you functioning, but it's not taking care of, the inhibition that you have because you're anxious, or a trauma that you had where you were abused, or just a lack of like erotic knowledge, like you haven't cultivated your own erotic intelligence, so you kind of don't know what to do, And so in those cases, I like to just direct women to like, all right, it's time for you to go on a journey of figuring out what you like. Sometimes I start women by just reading lots of erotica stories written by women and just telling me, okay, I hate this and I like this, Or I have them look at some erotic poetry. Someone will be like, this one turns me on, this one's really corny, and it gets, once they start getting engaged, their own mind gets like sort of ignited, like, and they start coming up with their own creative ideas inspired by that little bit of stimulus.
Right.
And from there, they can take it.
That's a really good way, because I know that a lot of that stuff is popular, like 50 Shades. I never read it just because I don't know. I'm the kind of person I'd like to explore things on my own, and I'm more visual. So like that book didn't really resonate with me, or wasn't anything I really wanted to explore. But it blew up. It blew up. Can you explain maybe what was behind that? Because it's people, like it's older women, it's people that you would not expect to read it, and it was flying off the shelves, and now the movie's about to come out, and everyone got that. So can you explain kind of the phenomenon behind that?
Sure. I mean, the theme in that book is the same as, it's been around for a long time, and it's in a lot of stories that turn women on, including all of the vampire stories, which is like, there's this inexperienced woman who's just your average, ordinary woman, but this powerful, sexy man who's kind of dangerous sees something special in her and both wants to harm her and take care of her at the same time. And so she experiences her power and sort of getting this like dangerous creature to like love her or take care of her instead of hurting her. And so that sort of tension is, I think, very erotic for women. And then the way that like this guy who is very decisively sexual in his own way draws her out of her shell, and then she starts to become more sexual, right? That's what's happening in the book, and that's a theme that happens in a lot of women's stories. And so I think that's fine. I think that I actually use that book sometimes to help men in sex therapy, because the male character is so confident. But I'm less inclined to use it with my female clients, because I'm really trying to encourage them to also sort of like take initiative and be leaders and show the guy around a little bit rather than just depending on him to do that.
Very cool. So do you think that women will learn how to do some of that with the women on my couch?
I think so. I provide a lot of different examples. So rather than just there's one path, I provide a lot of different examples for how women can get there. And I think that, some of the belief systems around sexuality from different periods of time can be ideas that women can internalize and grab onto. Like the idea that from Tantra, the idea that sexuality is spiritual, or from the ancient Minoans, before Greece, when they sort of had goddesses. That was, seemed to be a very earthy, beautiful, also spiritual sensuality. And I think that when sex is framed in a way that's healthy and even spiritual and just sort of beautiful, that I think that it gives a way for women to feel like this is something I can really embrace and like really love my body, and that this is something that I can bring to the bedroom. So they have all kinds of meditations and visualizations that are designed to wake a woman's body up so she's generating sexual energy in her body and that she can bring that to the bedroom. And so it's a very different concept than what happens now, where we might just show up to the bedroom like sort of at a zero energy level and kind of hoping he's going to incite passion in us, this thing we want, passion. But it's a heightened state that we don't actually get into very easily.
Interesting. So would you suggest that for someone with body issues? I know that both men and women kind of struggle with that. Like, there may be a guy who may not think like he's big enough, or that he was told something before, because I know that, especially in your book, like you talk about it, how like one little sentence could scar them for life. Like if a woman's like, "You're no good" or something, that can really scar them and affect like sexual performance. And with women, you know, if they don't feel like maybe after childbirth or whatever, they don't feel like they have their body back, how can they kind of start to gain back that confidence and be able to bring that sexual energy to the bedroom again?
Right. Well, I think that one thing to know is that most men that I talk to, in particular men who are in a relationship with you, are probably less focused on how perfect your body is, and they care more about how excited you are to be there. You know, how uninhibited you are. That overrides like what a woman's body looks like in most cases. I very rarely hear men tell me that a woman's body is the cause of their sexual issues. Every once in a while, some guy will say something like, "Oh, she's like gained some weight after the baby," or this or that. And usually, I notice a pattern that the guys who say that seem to have their own body image issues, and so they're projecting that onto her a little bit. But most guys don't seem to care. So I think that in terms of yourself and his body, I think it's important to, in a way, like develop the gaze of a poet. Be able to look at your body and see what is magnificent, what is actually beautiful, and what's sacred about the body. We're so used to like objectifying our body, like this size is good, this size is bad, this should be shaped like this. Like we're looking in this way that there's no love or beauty. Like the eyes of a poet sees beauty in everything, or sees meaning in everything, right? And when we objectify, we don't see meaning, right? We don't appreciate. And that the energy, when you get yourself into a state of like looking at your lover's body, just even looking at his penis and appreciating it, like this is something beautiful, it changes you. It changes how you feel. It changes your whole energy. It's the same thing, you can be directing that back toward your body. So it takes time, but again, exposure to all of these sort of different times and places in history is what can begin to shape how you look at sex and each other.
Awesome. Is there any resources that you would recommend? This is a selfish question, of course. Are there any resources you would recommend for anyone wanting to explore that time where sexuality was actually like celebrated and there were no judgments or any of that kind of or hidden agendas placed on it, and people were just free to explore?
Yeah, I think a really good book is The Tao of Loving. And another one called The Multi-Orgasmic Woman. Those are two books that influenced me a lot. You could just Google and sort of learn a little bit about the Minoan culture. There's the images and statues that they made of women just blew me away. And they have sort of a lasting impression, you know, on like how to sort of look at your body. Yeah, so I think those are good places to start. The Kama Sutra is a good place for just creating they have a lot of good advice for creating a sexy environment that I find helpful.
So much of it has been watered down, though. That's a little bit of my concern, because I guess to bring it down to a level where, you know, the basic person can understand, but I feel like a lot of Kama Sutra stuff has been watered down. Like Cosmo will have something on Kama Sutra, and it won't, like, you know, this isn't the authentic stuff. It's just kind of watered down. So is that still valid, or would you suggest reading the actual, like, the real?
I would advise people to like actually get the real books and take a look at the substantial version. It's worth the investment of your time, especially the Multi-Orgasmic Woman has actual concrete steps that you can take to help cultivate your sexuality. And then for all of these traditions, there are like in different communities, there's actual centers where you can go and like learn or train or participate in some way.
Oh, nice.
I visit a lot of them and have wrote about it in the book that's coming up. But for me personally, I'm not a practitioner of any one particular thing. I don't identify as I'm Tantra or I'm Taoist. I just have dabbled in a little bit of everything, and I've sort of pieced together all the things that work for me. And I think that's what women should be looking to do, is just to experience, explore, and then see what works for you.
Awesome. So we have 4 minutes left on our chat. It's been so great just touching base with you, connecting, and talking about this topic because it's just something that I know that I've gotten so much questions on. I'm just like, I want an expert here to kind of answer this. I have my own take on it. I have my own journey that I've gone on, but it's great to hear from an expert, someone who's working with patients like every day, and to get your perspective as well. And I'm glad that you normalized a lot of the things that we all have, like deep fears about, like different styles of sexuality or having a low libido. I'm sure that helped and inspired somebody today, and we'll be post this with the recording and everything. I feel the same way. It's not like a curse, and I feel like there are different stages in life, and that we can work together. I'm pretty sure we can, and that we owe it to ourselves to explore our sexuality for ourselves first before
Yeah.
we decide to partner with anyone. If that's the stage we're at, and even when you're in a relationship, to keep exploring. It's exciting, and your partner will find you more exciting and alluring because they're like, oh, I want to go on this journey or this exploration with you, learning like, ooh, it's great. So, what are your last words of advice or anything that you want to share with the audience today?
I just want to tell women, don't despair if you find yourself in a relationship where your libido is low. It doesn't mean that you're out of love. It doesn't mean that you're not soulmates or that you should break up or divorce him. But there is a wisdom to it. Your body is speaking to you, and so the thing to do is just to turn inward and just start asking yourself, what could this be? Is there something I'm angry with him about? Is there something I'm disappointed in? Is there something about how I feel about my body? And then you can address the issue that's causing it.
Awesome. Awesome. So when can we expect the Woman on My Couch to come out?
I just turned in my draft, actually, so as long as it takes the publishing company, I'm assuming sometime in 2015.
Woo! Okay, we'll definitely.
I'm anxious to get it out, though.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. Thank you so much for being a part of our expert chat series, and thank you everyone for watching the Battle of the Sexes show expert chat series. I want to remind everybody that National Singles Week tour. We are visiting Atlanta, New York City, and my hometown of Toronto during the 3rd week of September. You can grab your tickets for that on battleofthesexesshow.eventbrite.com. We'll be featuring more of these chats, and you will get to meet the panel in all 3 cities very soon. So thank you again, and have a great night. Bye. Oh, we're